stories because I love the stories, but also because I want you to look at the faces of censorship. This is what the faces look like. They look like Crystal's, they look like Katie's, they look like most of the people in this room. That is who is doing high school journalism in America today. There was actually a census of high school journalism done. This is now 10 years old by the US Department of Ed that said that 65% of the people enrolled in high school journalism were female, and it's only gotten, the gap has only gotten wider since then. It's only gotten wider. I see teachers nodding, right? It's a girls' club. It is a girls' club, and that's who's absorbing the brunt of the censorship too. And censorship is intolerable in any form, but I think it's particularly intolerable when we look at what's going on in the professional news media, where there's this very, very pronounced awareness that the executive suites of all of our newspapers and magazines and TV stations don't look like this room. They look like the boys' club, and they always have. And so there's this drop off, there's this disconnect between what scholastic journalism looks like and what the top leadership ranks of professional journalism look like. And it's just intolerable when we know that there is this problem to tell the strongest, best, most promising young woman who's being groomed for that future leadership position that she should shut up and keep her damn opinions to herself. This is leaning backward, right? this is unteaching in civics. This is unteaching leadership. Well, it is not just student journalists that suffer from the influence of the court case that we're here to talk about, the Hazelwood versus Kuhlmeyer case, which I'll explain in more detail in a second. The Hazelwood versus Kuhlmeyer case is about student speech that has anything to do with sort of the teaching of school curriculum, right? And so schools and school districts have taken a very broad view of what that encompasses, to include people like Leslie Lukow. Leslie, in Pennsylvania, many school districts have non-voting student board members who participate in the school board meetings. Leslie went to her school board and gave a speech, sort of a state of the school speech, in which she talked about the fact that she didn't feel like, and her classmates didn't feel like, the school adequately enforced disciplinary rules. So this actually very sort of pro-authority conservative speech that was talking about they're letting too many people sag their pants, and people are smoking in the restrooms, and discipline is broken down and it's not being sufficiently enforced. Well, her vice principal called her to the office the day after the speech and said, "You made the school look bad, and henceforth I am going to have to pre-approve all of your speeches to the Board of Ed before you give them, to make sure that there are not negative comments about the school," which sort of defeats the point of having a student representative on the board, right? This is, I love this one, Harold Shaw. Harold Shaw was from the St. Petersburg area. He was a valedictorian of his school, and Harold is this really enterprising, he's not anybody's idea of a traditional journalist, but he is a citizen journalist. Harold decided that the bathrooms in his school were so filthy and disgusting that he was going to do something about it by getting a small portable camera and documenting the unsanitary, unhygienic bathrooms in the school, and he did it in such graphic detail that I strongly recommend you avoid his YouTube video. It is very unappetizing. I took a screenshot of about the only thing that was suitable to reproduce, which is the broken paper towel holder, but the whole rest of it is just exactly what your worst imagination would tell you it is. And Harold throws this up on YouTube. It has a sort of a narration, a little amateur documentary film about the deplorable quality of these bathrooms, and makes it a public issue. Well, he's also elected the valedictorian of his school, which entitles him to a speaking slot on the graduation day. His superintendent actually tried to stop him from taking advantage of it, tried to disqualify him for being a bad citizen because he publicized the dirty bathrooms. He wasn't able to take the slot away from him, but what happened is Harold went up and he started to give his pre-approved scripted talk that had had been vetted by the school district. And if you actually watch, there's a video online of Harold giving this talk. At one point, he looks like he loses his place. He gets nervous, he stumbles, he loses his place, and he can't find his place on the script. So he's just sort of fumbling around quiet for a second. Well, the superintendent is convinced that this is where Harold is about to go off script and start ranting about the bathroom. And so at that point, he elbows Harold away from the microphone, tells him, "You're done here, Harold," and has security escort him out of the building so that he misses the rest of graduation, including getting his own diploma, because the superintendent is afraid he might talk about dirty bathrooms at graduation. Right? And this is the toll that Hazelwood has taken, because over the years the courts have told us that the Hazelwood case is not just about newspapers, it's about any speech that looks like it might be mistaken for the official speech of the school. It includes graduation speeches, which includes plays, musical performances. This is the Hazelwood case. Justice Byron White, who wrote the opinion in 1988, it's a case that at the time seemed to have been dubiously decided, and over time that has really borne itself out. The foundational kind of legal principle behind Hazelwood, to understand that, I guess you first have to start with the headwaters of where we came from, which is the Tinker case, right? And in 1969, that's when the Supreme Court, for the very first time, out loud explicitly recognized that students have First Amendment rights on school grounds during school time that the school can't take away. And that was the case, right, that we all learn about in junior high school civics that involves wearing a black armband to protest the Vietnam War. And if you're ever just feeling really down about America someday, you should pull out Justice A. Fortas's ruling in this case, because it's poetry, really. I mean, it is the song of America. It will just make you feel good to be an American, because it talks about sort of how we know that freedom is risky. We know that freedom is hazardous. It has hazardous right in there, but he concludes that's a risk we have to take, you know? And it's a goosebump moment when he says that. He sets up all the ways in which freedom is dangerous and hazardous, and people are gonna have hurt feelings, and they're gonna have differences of opinion, but our history says that that's a risk we have. And in the Tinker case, the Supreme Court validated the students' First Amendment rights and said that they have a protected First Amendment right to wear these armbands, even right during class time, because, and First Amendment law is always about the line drawing exercise, right? It's about, at some point, we all agree the government can step in and stop you from speaking or punishing you. Right? You're about to threaten to assassinate the president, or bribe your congressman, or engage in some other act of criminality, then the government can step in and punish you or stop you from speaking. But the line drawing is really everything in First Amendment land. And in the Tinker case, where that line was located was at the point that the Supreme Court called up the point of substantial disruption. That if you're about to disrupt the orderly operations of the school, that's the point where the school's authority starts and your freedom to speak ends. So that's pretty forgiving, right? I mean, that's, you know, until you see punches flying in the hallways or that is imminent, then students have the right to say what they want to say. But that, of course, wasn't the last word on the subject. Then in 1988, the Supreme Court comes back in the Hazelwood case, which is a case about high school journalism, where the court tells us that if the students are using what looks like a curricular vehicle for their expression, it is not your arm, it is not your t-shirt, it is not your baseball cap or your hairstyle or your choice of fashion, but it is a piece of school property that is provided as a part of the school's instructional day, like a newspaper, like a yearbook, like a play, like a musical performance. Then the school has virtually, as it turns out, unlimited authority. They relocated the line to something called a legitimate pedagogical justification. So it is theoretically possible for a student to show that the censorship was not pedagogically justified, but almost no one has been able to surmount that. There is one case out of a federal district court in Michigan in the 1990s where a student did sort of thread that needle and was able to show that the speech was so journalistically meritorious that the only possible reason could have been just pure naked image protection. And if you can show that you're actually denying the public truthful, accurate information in the service of PR image control, then you might be able to win. But that was only a federal district court case. We haven't seen people really challenge it very much since Hazelwood. It's been, it was already really an uphill climb for a student to ever take a First Amendment case to court for all of the reasons that you would suspect, because it's very time consuming, it's costly, you're never going to get a decision at a time that is really meaningful to you. The Hazelwood students, they originated this case. It took them 4.5 years from start to finish, and so people who were high school seniors at the time had already gotten their bachelor's degrees by the time the Supreme Court decision came out. So even had they won, the ruling would have been meaningless for them. They would have been in no position to take advantage of that. So that tells you that these cases are going to be rare, and there are so many places that you can stumble along the way that we have very little guidance from the lower courts since 1988 about what does and doesn't constitute lawful censorship under Hazelwood. So the we thought, right, Hazelwood was bad, and it was a setback, but we thought that it was about children. If you read the opinion, it looks like it is about protecting vulnerable children against content that might be inappropriately mature for them. That was really what that content was about. In the Hazelwood case, it was stories about teen pregnancy and a divorce and what it was like growing up as a child in a single-parent home, kind of things that the principal thought might be emotionally upsetting or inappropriate for some of the younger kids. So in reading that case, you assume, well, this would, of course, have no application at all to a college audience where everybody in the audience is an adult. And there's even a footnote in the Hazelwood case to that effect saying, look, we're not deciding today what the rights of college students are. This is only about high school students. But in the absence of any guidance from the Supreme Court, the lower courts have started to fill in that blank, and increasingly they are telling us that they will look to Hazelwood even at the level of college and even graduate school to be the measuring stick for the First Amendment rights of students. And so even though college students didn't believe they had any skin in the Hazelwood game, it turns out that they might quite a bit. In 2005, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeal showed, here's a map of what this looks like, right? I mean, the country is divided into geographic regions. There are 12 geographic regions of the country that are governed by these regional courts of appeal, and unless you're fortunate enough to be that one of 95 cases a year that the Supreme Court takes up, this is the last word for you. What these courts tell you is the law. And so in the Seventh Circuit, which you see is Wisconsin and Indiana and Illinois, in 2005, the federal court came back and told us that Hazelwood applies to a college newspaper as well. This was a censorship case involving the censorship of a college newspaper, Governors State University in Illinois, where the students were, it was a very opinionated newspaper. Frankly, it wasn't the greatest quality newspaper in the world, but the First Amendment protects bad journalism too, thankfully, for people in the profession. And so the students did this, sort of opinionated newspaper that was critical of the administration, and the administration shut them down, discontinued funding for the paper, wouldn't distribute the last issue of the paper. And when the students sued, challenging it under the First Amendment, the federal Seventh Circuit came back and said, we think that when the Supreme Court said school and student in Hazelwood, this is a school and you are a student, and therefore your rights also are circumscribed by Hazelwood, and it sent it back to the lower court to decide it in under the Hazelwood standard. And what has happened since then is 4 out of these geographic circuits have applied the Hazelwood standard to the speech of college as well as high school students. The 10th Circuit, which is based in Denver, out west, right, the Mountain West states, this is one that many of these cases don't actually arise out of journalism at all. They arise out of things like in the 10th Circuit case, there was a college student who was an observant Mormon, and she was studying, taking drama class. She was studying theater, and at one point she was assigned, as part of class assignment, to read a monologue that was full of profanity and references to sex. And she said, "I'm just not comfortable performing that. Can you give me a different monologue to perform? I'm happy to do an alternative assignment, but this is one that I just religiously can't bring myself to do." And the instructor said, "Well, sorry, in order to be a successful actress, you have to be willing to read lines that you're not comfortable reading." She got called into a meeting with the department head, who told her, "You're just not theater major material. You're dismissed from the program for your defiance of this instruction." She challenged it under the First Amendment, and the 10th Federal Circuit came back and said, "You lose and the college wins because this is Hazelwood speech, and you have essentially no protected First Amendment rights."
Wow.
Yeah, and that's the state of law right now. There was we were involved in most of this has taken place. I can't take the rap for it. Most of it has taken place before I got this job in 2008. But there was one that we were involved in Alabama, where a lady named Judy Heenan, who was, I want to say, 52 years old. She had gone back to school to get a nursing degree. So she was a graduate student in a nursing program at Auburn University, 51 or 52 years old, and she was kind of a pain in the ass. She was a complainer. She liked to rock the boat and complain about the unfairness of the way people were being graded and the unfairness of the disciplinary system. And she just got on the wrong person's nerves, and she got dismissed from the program. And she sued and said, "Well, look, I didn't do this in the middle of class. I did this in one-on-one conversations with my instructors. I was telling them, I don't think you're being fair. I don't think this program is fair. I don't like the grading standards. I don't like the disciplinary standards. I didn't disrupt class. I was doing this in, what I thought was the right process." And they told her, "No, school's got a right to do that because that too is Hazelwood speech, that you were complaining about the curriculum." And in the view of the federal courts in Alabama, complaining about the curriculum is curricular speech. And so she had no First Amendment right, and she was her dismissal from the program was upheld. So that's the state of First Amendment rights when you're not using an armband or a T-shirt or anything that could be in any way confused with a curricular vehicle of the school is pretty dismal. It's pretty much like playing against a casino with loaded dice. It's heads the school wins and tails the student loses. So the Hazelwood ruling, like we said, has really not stood the test of time well. On the 25th anniversary of Hazelwood in 2013, all of the major journalism groups in America, the Society of Professional Journalists, the Journalism Education Association, JEA, the AEJMC, which is the organization you belong to if you are a college instructor in journalism, all adopted resolutions calling on schools and to forsake relying on Hazelwood, saying, "Look, the jury is in. We've had 25 years of experience with this, and we know that this is too much authority. That schools are not using it in the way that the Supreme Court probably envisioned, just to protect people against things that are inappropriate or harmful, but in fact are using it for purposes of PR, image control, like in Judy Heenan's case, to stop people from complaining or silence dissenters." And the SPJ adopted this resolution unanimously, pointing out that this is not the right way, not only to teach journalism, but to teach civics either, right? I mean, if we're graduating a generation of people who are told that you can't challenge government policies and that you'll be punished if you try, that seems like that is the most noxious civic lesson you could possibly deliver, right? It's certainly not, we give a lot of lip service to civic education and wanting civically engaged graduates, but that's when schools think that civic engagement means volunteering at the food bank or joining the Model UN and adopting a resolution about famine in Darfur. They don't care about that at all. Once it's brought home, once students actually try to civically engage on the things that mean the most to them and on which, frankly, their voices are the most valuable, then schools are not so much for the civic engagement anymore. This is one reason why this matters so much. The Brookings Institution in 2009, Brookings Institution, one of the big national think tanks, came out with a study about the state of education journalism in America. And what they concluded was that looking at all the major print, broadcast, and online news organizations in the country over a 9-month period, they studied like an entire school year, basically, a 9-month period, that only 1.4% of the content of those major news outlets was devoted to education, and that out of that 1.4%, most of the 1.4% was disaster related in one way or another. This is school shootings or meningitis outbreaks. It was not education policy. It was not about the nuts and bolts of whether these schools were effective or not, or were doing a good job educating kids. That was even a minority of the 1.4%. And in the Brookings report, they even mentioned the censorship of student journalism as a factor to be addressed by policymakers, saying that, well, schools are telling students not to talk about issues of public concern, and they need to knock that off because student journalism is often how professional journalists find out about what's going on inside of schools, because students are telling them. This is one of my very favorite ones. I don't know those of you who went to the Denver convention, if you were lucky enough to see this or not. There's a documentary coming out in a couple of months by some filmmakers at the University of Colorado Boulder that's focusing on the state of the rights of student journalists in Colorado. And one of the stories that they're sharing is a story about David McSwain. And this is David circa his high school senior year. David, when he was a high school journalist, decided that he was going to go undercover as an Army recruit. He had this great story idea because he noticed that a lot of his friends who were sort of the biggest stoners in school, the kids who were graduating at the bottom of the class and often not graduating at all, were getting picked up by the military. And he thought, how is this possible that these people who don't seem like military material at all are successfully getting recruited into the military? So he went undercover. He showed up at his Army recruiting office, and he had his dad with a video camera, and he had this very kind of rudimentary handheld video footage. He showed up at the Army recruiting office. He told them two things. He told them, I'm a high school senior, but I'm not going to graduate. I'm not going to get my diploma. And also, I'm addicted to pot. I can't stop smoking pot, and frankly, I have no intention of stopping. I'm going to keep smoking pot because I like it. And the military recruiter told him, no problem. We can fix you right up. He told them, he showed him how to print your own high school diploma online. And David even asked him, how do I do this? And he said, well, just make up a name of a school, call it Faith Hill Baptist Academy. And that's what he called it, Faith Hill Baptist Academy. So David has a homemade diploma from Faith Hill Baptist Academy. And then about the pot, they said, well, there's some stuff that you can take that will help you fool a drug test, and here's where you can get it. And when he said, well, I don't have a car, the recruiter drove him to the store to buy the drug test fooling medication so that he could get himself eligible to be a military recruit. Well, when David published this story, it was like the proverbial pin had been pulled out of the grenade. 60 Minutes picked up on it and did an episode on it, and as a result, the entire Pentagon told all of its recruiting offices around the country to stop recruiting for a day so they could retrain their recruiting officers to stop them from doing stuff like this. And this is the work of a high school journalist. This is the work of somebody that, frankly, right, only could have been done by a high school journalist because he was the one who was in a position to observe that underqualified people were being recruited and to pass himself off as one, right? And so this is an incredible public service done by an enterprising high school journalist. And so, you know, like I say, is that real enough for you? You know, I mean, if we think this doesn't matter, it can matter quite a bit. It can really make quite a big difference in the lives of all of us to protect the rights of students to do stories like this. And David has gone on, by the way, he's a very successful professional investigative journalist. Now he works at the Austin American Statesman. He graduated from UC Boulder, and he's now got a job at the Austin American Statesman. So what's the solution? If we can't wait for the Supreme Court to have Hazelwood 2 and to get the exact right set of facts to try to challenge it, which you have to have incredible luck and timing to do that, the answer is state law. My map is even slightly out of date here because of a great development that I'll tell you about in a minute. I say 8.5 state laws exist protecting student journalism, and again, North Dakota should be colored in there. A half because the state of Illinois actually has a law protecting only the independence of college journalists and not high school journalists. Illinois there was a bill to protect both college and high school journalists, but it got compromised away in the political process, and only college journalists are protected today. And then Washington State, Pennsylvania, and the District of Columbia have State Board of Ed rules protecting student journalism. And what these statutes do is just kind of return the state of play to Tinkerland, which is not, right, one of the many myths about these state statutes is that they're anything goes laws, that students are going to run amok and run wild with their freedom because you're going to give them the same freedom that Penthouse Magazine or the Wall Street Journal has. And the easy answer to that is no, all it does is restore things to the state of play, the balanced rule that we used to have under the Tinker rule, and the rule that is still the rule today in schools for t-shirts and baseball caps and armbands, right, and all other manner of speech with which schools have become accustomed and acclimated over the past 40 years. North Dakota, just as of April 10th, joined the club by passing what's called the New Voices Act of North Dakota. This is the late Senator John Wall, who was a very, very long time and beloved high school journalism educator in North Dakota. He was a journalism teacher who got himself elected to the Senate. So if somebody in this room wants to help us out, that would be the best thing we could possibly do. But he, you don't have to go as far as John, which is he also died in office, and so the bill was named in his memory. If you really want to take one for the team, fine, but you don't need to go quite that far. But he died in office, and in his memory, this bill was introduced. And in an utterly unpredicted and unaccountable sequence of events, passed the House and Senate without a single negative vote. Total bipartisan support, was signed into law by the governor, and will take effect June 1st. And it's one of the best in the country. It's one of the best in the country for two reasons: because it protects teachers as well as students. This is huge. There are only a handful of states, California and Kansas, and now North Dakota, that explicitly protect teachers against retaliation. And we know that often that's the weakest link, and that's the pressure point, is that schools know they can only do so much to students to get away with that, because students, after all, are an asset. You know, one day you'll be an alumnus, and they'll be wanting to brag about your accomplishments or raise money from you, whereas teachers are a cost center. And so they're only too happy to use them as the vehicle to accomplish their censorship. So the New Voices Act protects teachers. The other thing is that it includes both colleges and high schools in it. When I showed you that map, the kind of sad reality about these statutes is only a small minority of them actually include colleges in them, because the wave of anti-Hazelwood laws, as they're called, after 1988 was done in mindful of the state of the law at that time, which was that Hazelwood was assumed to apply only to K-12 schools. Nobody thought that a federal judge would ever be stupid enough to apply the Hazelwood principle to a college, so nobody thought it was necessary to incorporate that into state statutes. And so Arkansas and Kansas and Colorado and Iowa and Massachusetts all do not include colleges at all. And so it's actually true in Iowa today that you probably have more legally protected free speech rights as a high school student than you do as a college student. It's a gap in the safety net. It's a hole in the net that was there, again, because it was never foreseen or anticipated that the Hazelwood principle could possibly apply to the speech of adult speakers. And so from now on, the North Dakota law is going to be the state of the art. It's going to be the model from which everything is based. And I'm going to wrap up, and I'd love to hear from you all about this. But the takeaway from the experience in North Dakota, and I sort of became a part-time citizen of Bismarck. I moved up there, and I made several trips to go testify in front of their legislature, was the indispensable things that you absolutely had to have to succeed were, first of all, some really committed people on the ground. You had to have some quarterbacks and some field generals on the ground. We got really lucky to have a guy named Steve Listopad, who was a college journalism professor up there, who just decided to will this law into existence. He had been a high school student of John Wall's. John Wall had been his high school journalism teacher. He's now a journalism professor. And so this is a personal crusade for him to pass this in memory of John Wall, and he just willed this to happen. And his students, actually, I mean, he showed me, I went with him to his college, University of Jamestown, he showed me the lunch table where he and 6 of his students took out a legal pad and just drew out what would become the New Voices Act, took it to their hometown legislator, who fortunately happened to be a Republican, which is the majority party in North Dakota, so that that person was in a position to be able to make things happen and get the ear of the governor. So that was indispensable, to have passionate, committed foot soldiers on the ground. The other thing was the unanimous and enthusiastic support of the professional news media. I went and I did a visit with the editorial board at the Fargo newspaper, which is the largest one in the state. They wrote some favorable editorials. The Bismarck Tribune newspaper wrote favorable editorials. When you have that enthusiasm from the professional news media, it's absolutely essential. The flip side of that was in the state of Washington, where advocates tried to pass an anti-Hazelwood law and had some really good momentum and thought they had the stars lined up in their favor. The Seattle Times actually wrote an editorial utterly blowing them out of the water, saying that, well, journalism is way too sensitive and dangerous to be trusted to children, and this is a bad law. And that gave cover to all of the political opponents to say, look, the people who know this subject best don't even support it, and that was death right there. That was an insurmountable obstacle. So those are the two things that you've absolutely got to have. It doesn't hurt to have a third thing, which is a compelling local story to tell. In North Dakota, we had a guy named Jeremy Murphy, who had been a high school teacher in West Fargo, who had been fired from his teaching job because he coached his students to do good journalism. And in fact, the school board was utterly unrepentant about it. Basically, they told him in so many words that you're putting too many negative stories in the newspaper. Out you go. Well, he went out into exile for a couple of years, but then the school administration turned over and changed, and he actually got his job back. He's at West Fargo right now, and he came and he testified and was one of our most compelling witnesses to be able to, be a living monument to the need for these statutes. So it doesn't hurt to have a good local story to tell, but there are certainly, as you've seen, plenty of stories out there to be told, and it's really important to bring those forward. I mean, so many people are intimidated and inhibited about sharing those stories because they are afraid of authority and they're afraid of getting punished, and they don't think it will do any good. But that's the first step, really, in any curing anything, right? Is you have to recognize you have a problem, and you have to recognize the magnitude of the problem. That's why everybody got a Cure Hazelwood wristband. We started this campaign in concert with that 25th anniversary in 2013, because we realized that, you can't demonize school principals. You can't demonize superintendents and school boards. They have hard jobs. People identify with them, and I do too. I sympathize with them. They have a lot on their plate. They have hard jobs. Sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes they make bad judgment calls. That doesn't make them bad people, but you can demonize a court case. You can demonize this. This is the opponent. This is the enemy, not the principals, not the superintendent, but this court case. I kind of liken it to, for those of you who follow legal news, right? Remember the Lily Ledbetter case? Lily Ledbetter was this employee who found out belatedly, many years later, that all the time she had been working for her employer, they'd been paying the men more than the women for the same job. And they'd done such a good job of concealing this that Lily had no more federal claim under the Equal Pay Act, because there's a statute of limitations, and the statute of limitations had run because her employer was so good at making sure that she didn't find out that she had been cheated. Well, the Supreme Court ruled against Lily Ledbetter and said, sorry, the law's the law. You lose, the statute of limitations ran. But what happened is her case became the rallying cry in Congress, and the Lily Ledbetter Act was actually the first bill that Barack Obama signed into law, overturning the effects of that court case, because the public looked at it and said, sorry, we just can't accept that result. That's an intolerable result. And so I sort of look at the campaign to cure Hazelwood like the Lily Ledbetter campaign. That, there are just some things that we can't tolerate, and that we can't let the Supreme Court have the last word on. I think this is one of them. So with that, I'd really like to hear what people are on the table think.
Wow.
Yeah.
So maybe we share feelings, thoughts, and questions that this talk has raised for you.
I just asked a question. You mentioned teachers in the past. Has this law been applied directly to teachers over the years?
Yeah, so
cases of that.
So a couple of things. First of all, in the Hazelwood ruling itself, and in the Tinker ruling, well, the Tinker ruling more explicitly, actually, the Tinker ruling actually joins the First Amendment rights of teachers and students at the hip. It talks explicitly about the rights of teachers and students. Over the years, that path has diverged. Now there is this whole other body of legal precedent from the Supreme Court about the rights of government employees, and I can sum it up for you by saying there are none. I mean, the Supreme Court has really divested government employees of almost all meaningful First Amendment protections, although there was this really, the corpse twitched a little bit last year. There was a little sign of life yet left in, there was a whistleblower case that came out of Alabama last year where a guy he worked for the community college system in Alabama. He was an instructor in the community college system. He knew that they had put this state politician on the payroll of the college to not do anything, that it was a no-work job that they had created, basically, as a way to curry favor with this politician. And he blew the whistle on it. He testified in front of a grand jury about it, and he got fired from his job for giving the grand jury testimony. And the Supreme Court came back and said, well, yeah, we know what we said in all these previous cases about the First Amendment rights of public employees, but this goes too far. Even we can't countenance this. And so that's protected First Amendment speech, even though he was doing it in his employee capacity. But that's the exception. The rule these days is that if you're a public employee and you're speaking about anything that has to do with your own job, it's not considered constitutionally protected speech anymore. So that's why these anti-retaliation laws are so necessary, because I have no confidence at all. I mean, none. I have zero confidence that a teacher who was fired because she either encouraged her students to pursue, an embarrassing story, or just refused to stop them from pursuing an embarrassing story would have a First Amendment claim to that. I have no confidence that that's true. In fact, these anti-Hazelwood laws have not gone to court very much at all, but there are two cases that I'm aware of that did primarily involve the rights of teachers and not students, one in California and one in Iowa, and so far teachers are 2-0 winning those cases under those statutes. There was a guy named Lang, L-A-N-G-E in Iowa, who lost his job. Same thing, not stopping his students from publishing some content that their administration disapproved of. And, excuse me, he wasn't fired, he actually just got a disciplinary write-up. He got a bad disciplinary write-up in his personnel file. And he used that state statute to get the disciplinary write-up cleared off of his record. So the Court of Appeals in Iowa said, yeah, you can't punish somebody for doing something that he has no legal right to do. You can't punish somebody for not breaking the law, right? And he was being told by his supervisor, you are to break the anti-censorship law, and he said, I can't do that, that's illegal, and the courts came back and said, he's right, you can't order him to break the law.
So I love the fact that the North Dakota statute could be a model for other New England states, and that's really intriguing. I obviously want to learn more about the specifics of that law, but I would love to reflect with the people in this room around. You say there are 3 things necessary to move forward with some kind of action: committed people on the ground, support of the professional news media, and a compelling local story. Rhode Island educators, students, teachers to be, do we have any of those 3 things in place in this, in Little Rhode?
We do in Lincoln.
Can you tell us more?
I think I've seen the story. Wait, the compelling story.
I was thinking that too. I haven't heard a terrible story in Rhode Island in 10 years.
I'd love to see that on the books.
The actual law.
Yeah.
I would too.
So maybe if we push the envelope journalistically, the student press and the high school press, we create the compelling story.
I think one of our problems, our drawbacks, would be the lack of high school journalism.
Right, in general.
Stage.
Right.
I
Right.
agree.
Because
Right.
you're the only
It's
other
pretty
advisor I
tiny,
know.
right?
And we've never met.
I know.
Are you thinking
Yeah,
guys
we have
are
4
too?
members. We have 4 members.
4 members.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I thought you meant your
Well,
school.
we had 2 of them. We had 3 of them.
And
there's
what
someone else.
explains the lack of student journalism? There are only maybe 4. What explains the lack of student journalism in Rhode Island?
Lack of budget, conflicting requirements.
More and more of my students are hard pressed to find room in the schedules for
Yeah.
journalism, and we have 4 classes. We teach broadcasting, print, advanced journalism and intro to journalism, but we also have an independent study driven one called Topics in Journalism. So we keep our kids busy, and we used to have, 100 kids enrolled at once. And now the numbers keep getting smaller and smaller because they have to do this as a graphic requirement, this, that, the other thing. And they're like, I have to take 2 math courses next year, and I can't fit this into my AP, the AP things are.
The AP, graduation requirements, the number of credits. Sadie can probably speak to it.
Do you think there's a cultural issue too? Go ahead.
Well, you could probably discuss that.
Well, I know in Kingston High School we only have 1 newspaper class, and that meets at a specific time. And I had trouble. I only joined the newspaper this year, even though I'd been interested in a very long time, because I had so many schedule conflicts. I was taking courses at URI, so I couldn't fit it into my schedule. I had AP courses and all this different stuff, and I couldn't fit it into my schedule. And I know a lot of people who are interested in taking newspaper and journalism, and they just can't find the room.
The greatest irony in our school is that there's a graduation requirement that's a 1 semester of civics, which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yes,
are
we have that.
encouraged to change the world and question their authority, but because of this 1 semester requirement, a lot of them can't fit my. I've gone to,
Yeah.
Yours doesn't count as a civics requirement?
no, and I tried.
I saw that
Um,
thread. I
I've-
watched.
I've gone from having 35 kids try to take the class and having to cut it to 28 in the half. So this year I've got 8.
And the other side of that is our courses, I'm sure Elizabeth could probably figure this out, they attract the best and brightest and most ambitious of students
Right.
who are also doing all the other
Sure.
things that Sadie's right here is doing. So
if it's made a club, they're in sports, they're in this
the
club.
club thing
that
is a problem
club.
as well, right?
Right.
If I have a meeting and maybe,
Yeah.
the editors and chief show up, I mean, I have to have more than one because they're so busy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's hard.
It's even the ranking of it, because it's ranked as college prep.
We do live streaming of some of our
Ah.
games, and I can barely muster up a couple of kids to go up there and they love it, but they're all so busy doing other things.
I asked my whole class if they could come.
Can you help me explain the college prep versus honors challenge? That is how it's,
Yeah, the honors, in order to get into the top 10 club, or to preserve their quality points in their
They
ranking,
push their averages past 4.0 by taking honors.
they can take honors and AP classes, and so they don't wanna take the college.
They learn how to take a college prep elective, which is what we teach.
And I see it as someone who teaches English. I teach the humanities course. The kids that go through Doreen's program, I'm reading essays and thinking, my goodness, these kids are amazing writers. And then you do a little research, and all of those kids that do that journalism program, they are incredible writers. And I'm thinking, where does this come from? And it's the program. And I'm not sure that our institution, I'm not sure, and I know that we value the journalism program, and that's because she's
It's a
being
great
fierce,
school,
lion in protecting her kids' stories. I know that she fights
with everybody.
with everybody to protect her kids' stories. But I think that that's part of it too, that there's not enough understanding that we are improving, we are making better communicators, better thinkers, kids that do want to be the change in the world, and I think that our program is expanding, and I'm thrilled that there's 4 from our English department that are,
We actually added 2 film classes as well.
so it's all media, so it's exciting, it's really exciting to be a part of it. And
They're
for
very
me, when I
supportive.
started this journey with Doreen, it was I was like going through, how do you get your kids to write so well? I want my kids to write like you. But now that I went to one of your seminars, and it's so much more than that. It's so much more. It's to teach these kids, you gotta be the change in the world. You gotta question. And I'm so excited. I'm so glad I'm here today.
so I'm wondering if, it's an interesting thing to think about, is there a reframing, is there a reframing strategy? Looks like we might have some committed people on the ground. We may or may not have the support of the news media, we'll find out. We've been pestering them like crazy about this event, so maybe we'll have some support from them, or maybe not. And I'm wondering about the compelling local story. If the story isn't a problem that the law would solve, I'm wondering if there's another way to reframe the story or the problem that this law would solve.
I've been contemplating, do you guys do senior project? For one of your graduation?
We call it
projects?
exhibitions.
Senior
Uh-huh.
exhibition. Our seniors all have to, and our democracy students, the one semester democracy class also has a project
Yeah.
that they have
I'm
to.
doing both.
You're doing both, right? But I've been wondering if, one of our options for senior project is to improve the system. And I talked to your journalism kids a couple weeks ago about this would be a system to improve. If it could be,
A campaign.
student driven.
Right.
I don't know. a
As
group
part of their
them
project,
together. I
they
don't
take
know.
on the, let's go to talk to our state legislators,
Yeah.
let's put this forward, let's do a
Because if
campaign.
we don't
Well, it
have,
actually
Wouldn't
inspires
that be
that,
fun?
it inspires that partnership again with social studies as well, so.
it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not, we've been shortchanged, we've been censored, but we could
Make
improve
it better.
this. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that when we were doing the hearings in North Dakota, we were a little bit up against that same thing because the kids and the teachers who came to the hearings in North Dakota were the haves. They were the 1%ers, they were,
Sure.
because in order for your school to give you a day off to come and go to this hearing, right, it's gotta be a supportive school. It's gotta be a school, right, that gets it. And so that was part of the story that we wanted to make sure that the kids got across and the teachers got across as they were testifying was, look, you're seeing the 1% here. What you're not seeing are the people who are not here. In fact, one of the teachers actually recounted that she invited one of her colleagues to come and bring the journalism class. I mean, the two different teachers brought virtually an entire journalism class. So it was wonderful. She had these hearing rooms full of these eager young journalist faces. But she said she invited a colleague to come and bring her class as well. And then she said, oh, we would get in trouble if we did that. Because we've been told not to rock the boat here. And so it's that level of it. It's hard oftentimes to put your finger on a specific piece of editorial content and say, this story was stopped. And we do have those, not in Rhode Island, but we certainly have those in other states. But more than that is the mentality and the environment that's created where people either just sort of censor themselves, right, and steer away from controversial topics, or they don't even get as far as submitting the story, right? They're waved off of it somewhere in the process before it ever gets to that confrontation point of submitting the story and being told not to. So I think there's quite a lot of that. I don't know how you capture that. I mean, Renee, that's one reason why I wanted to make sure to engage with people who are PhDs and researchers, right? Because that is the sort of thing that seems like it's amenable to research. If somebody wanted to go out in the field and do, and Rhode Island be a great laboratory to do it because you could cover the state wall to wall, right? Yeah, it would be trying to figure out, can we put a measurement to this self-censorship? Can we put a measurement to the extent to which people feel, it could be a true, false, yes, no kind of question. I feel that I would be encouraged and supported in taking on topics that reflect critically or negatively on my school, yes, no.
Interesting, I like that.
What a cool idea.
We just did a list of, we updated a current list of journalism advisors and what I took down into. And,
And how
I
many
shared-
people are on that list?
you know what, I haven't seen it, I haven't studied it, maybe 16?
Right.
And some of them, well, some of them are like English teachers who kind of
Yeah.
volunteer. I mean, there were various degrees, but you could send, I guess a survey could be done for people on the list.
I think, I'm just like kind of thinking out loud in terms of that really, I think that college prep category. And I know that you do lots with that, with college, the different programs. But if we could somehow have more of a connection, like we have the Bryant connection for our mentoring program, I think that sells it too.
But we do have a
Yes.
partnership, it's sort of informal partnership.
Right, we
with
could
the
kind of make that more up to-
Deeper,
Yeah,
yeah, then it might
More and
support
more.
the honors designation.
right, or
Perhaps.
AP even.
I wanna play
Equals.
devil's advocate.
Is there an AP journalism class? I don't
don't
know.
think
Some
there
people
is.
do the language and
There's an I.
the
Yeah, we have
as
it.
a newspaper, as a journalism.
Ah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right,
We
intensive
just
learner
started
four.
it next year. I'm
And
not teaching.
the writing one for class?
Sorry?
The writing one for class?
The
You guys
writing
don't do
letter
the writing
class?
one for class?
No, the
The what
AP
is it?
is, that we have language and literature, what's the
Right.
other one called, language and rhetoric?
Right.
No, you have language and composition. right?
Language and composition.
Yeah.
Some people do that with the
Yeah.
intensive journalistic writing
Right.
model, the IJW model.
Yeah, that's different than what we do.
Okay, I wanna play devil's advocate, cause here's what's, the question is in the back of my mind, and I love to hear what you think, but also love to hear what you think. Some people could sit here today and listen to this great talk and go, okay, so school-sponsored journalism was killed by Hazelwood, and it's limping along, but it's limping. So if students have more legal rights out of school for expression, and if they have tools like blogs and YouTube and all the media they have at their disposal, then long live the death of school journalism. Kill it quick and get kids outside of school doing this stuff robustly. Let's support them at home where they have more legal rights than at school. Let's kill all the school journalism programs so that they can be reborn outside of school. How would you respond to that? I'm playing devil's
Ask
advocate.
Sadie.
Well, it's really hard to answer that question because while there is a lot of social media and such, it's hard to get everyone connected. And the school paper, like we put the school paper in every single classroom, and people will go over and pick it up and they're reading it and they're talking about it. And that's just a great time to like talk about the issues that we have. And it connects the entire school instead of just some kids online instead of.
And you want the experience, I'm just, do something with the picture here. You want the experienced journalism advisor advising them how to do it responsibly.
Yeah, good point.
professionally.
So there's some value added to the faculty member.
I think that's my answer, and I think that's the best answer, right? Is like, I've tried very hard to figure out when you're in that room having a conversation with people who are opponents or skeptics, right? You're trying to change the mind of people who are, let's say the School Board Association or School Superintendent Association. The way to do it, I mean, I used to be a real lawyer. I used to have actual real lawyer job all the time. When I was a real lawyer, I figured out very quickly that the only way to win in a negotiation was to convince the person on the other side of the table that what you wanted them to do was actually in their best interest, right? And that's how you win. And I think in this discussion, it has to be about, well, look, what are schools concerned about today? What is on the minds of school administrators and of consumers? And one answer is, right, the uncivil way that people conduct themselves online, so-called cyberbullying, right? And so my speech to that person who's concerned about cyberbullying is, look, there's a proven effective program with decades worth of results that teaches people that when they write, they should sign their real names, they should correct their mistakes, they should consider all perspectives, they should they should tell the truth. They should verify the sources of information on which they're relying, right? They should respect opposing points of view and take them into account, and that they should consider the ethical impact on the people that they're writing about before they publish, right? There is a proven successful, effective protocol, right, with decades in the field to show that it works, and you don't have to reinvent it. And so now journalism is not a problem for you; it's a solution, right? And that's my talk to the school administrators of the world. I think that's, and do I think that if you repeal the Hazelwood rule, that suddenly there is going to be an outpouring of people into newsrooms. I think that's oversimplifying and overselling it, but I do think it's a speed bump. I think it is if the word gets around, because kids talk, right? If the word gets around that, working in that newsroom is no fun because you can't do anything. You're always being told, no, can't, stop. That's really bad buzz for that program. That's a really good way to kill the program, just through word of mouth. On the other hand, right, if people see something really cool and they say, oh, I'd like to do that, I'd like to be part of that, I'd like to be involved in that, then that's a really good way to ignite and to perpetuate the program, right? And so if the word gets around that journalism is frustrating and disempowering, that's an anti-recruitment, right? And so, in the adult world, right, if I told you there's no more Fourth Amendment to the Constitution anymore, and so if you go out onto the highways, the police could pull you over for any reason at all, just not liking the way you look, and could hold you for an unlimited amount of time without telling you what you're being charged with. Go ahead, go out and enjoy, knock yourself out, right? How interested would you be in getting on the highway, right? I mean, not that much. Even if you're not up to anything in particular, just sort of knowing that you don't have that safety net anymore would be a huge deterrent to your getting out on the road. And it's the same with journalism. I think that the knowledge that people have that they don't have any rights is a real deterrent to them ever getting out on the road.
So I want to ask you, because it raised a question that Rene was trying to play devil's advocate. I want to go even further. And the two messages that I'm hearing from you is, one, is the 3 steps that Rene was kind of restating about what we can do to change. But as a teacher, I'm terrified hearing your presentation and saying, so the second message that I'm hearing is, as an activist, I should do things. As a teacher, I shouldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And what you just said about the students, I'm thinking about the teachers, but that's the same message for the teacher themselves. Like, I don't want to get fired, so I shouldn't do anything. I shouldn't even encourage my students. And so I'm kind of wondering, because there's those 2 messages in your talk and your examples. So yes, there's the North Dakota, but it doesn't show yet about how it really empowered the teachers.
Yeah, well, so I mean, in the short term, right, I certainly don't think that teachers need to be the face of any type of a political movement, I mean, I think that the teachers need to take a supporting role and let the students lead. On the other hand, I mean, one thing that teachers can do, and actually, hey, I've got a room full of teachers here, this is great. I have been for years wanting, I used to have a friend who worked for the NEA, the National Education Association, and he told me, he actually gave me a form and some instructions. He said, if you could just get like a half a dozen teachers who are members of the NEA to sign this form, we'll start a journalism caucus inside of the NEA, and that way you'll have access to our staff, and you'll have a spot in our newsletter, and you'll have a spot on the program at our national conventions if you have a caucus. And I couldn't get 6 people. I couldn't find 6 NEA members who were journalism teachers to sign a doggone thing, and I still want to, because it only takes about a half a dozen people. It doesn't take that many, but that would be an interesting start, because it would give us access to infrastructure. The reason I'm bringing this up is, I mean, one thing teachers can do is they can importune their union leaders to say, hey, you should be for this, because this is about protecting teachers against retaliation. So in the short term, during the sort of campaign phase, right, that's the role that teachers can most usefully play, is empower and coach up their students. I love this idea of a project like this. I've always thought that, students are under so much pressure now to do community service things, right? And so here's this workforce. Here's this workforce of young people who are out being told, go put in some community service hours. Wouldn't this be an awesome community service project to say, I drafted a bill, I met with a legislator, right? I testified in the committee hearings. So
yeah, I do have 6 juniors.
Yeah, awesome. Right, but
so talk us through the process.
Yeah,
I drafted a bill.
Right, I drafted this bill. I talked to
legislators.
the legislator. I testified in the committee here.
I developed a public service campaign that we circulated through social media.
Built a website that I showed you, the New Voices one, right? The New Voices people. Oops, there we go. I think Steve actually may have built that website, but the New Voices of North Dakota, if you look online, they've got a website and a Facebook page. And yeah, right. I mean, if the kids wanted to start a social media presence for the campaign, you want to call it the New Voices Act, you know, and start a social media presence for it. Yeah, that'd be a
I
good
have a
project.
class of college students this fall. We would love, as the kind of getting that the college students are just as vulnerable to Hazelwood as high school students. I've got 15 undergrads, all media majors. I'm thinking, why couldn't they help
What I
with
need,
this campaign?
what I need to find out, I don't know if you know this, Sadie, is how much are kids allowed to work together on the same project? I know like we've had a fashion show where one kid
Did X,
you know,
Y, and Z.
did that and another one made the clothes
Right.
and another one did.
It's sort of limited because it's very difficult to like, work together like, with your schedules and everything. And a lot of kids go only so far with their projects.
Yeah.
Because we have time constraints, we can only we have to do our project within 3 months. And so we could probably draft a bill or something, but we couldn't actually follow it into fruition.
That's my problem with the kids graduating.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, that's. I mean, there's no question. The even as relatively smooth sailing as we had in North Dakota, it was still a 2-year long process. I mean, from drafting to enactment was 2 years, and indeed, I don't think any one of Steve's college students was still in college at the time it got done. So yeah, people have to be willing to invest in something from which they probably personally won't see any benefit. But you know, it's you're planting the seed for the crops that someone else is going to eat. You know?
Sure, and a 3-month investment is still an investment,
Some
right?
of my kids end up in your program.
Right. And do you do the senior project in the fall semester and the spring semester, or just in the spring semester?
Mostly in the spring semester. We do most of
Everybody's
our-
school does it differently.
We do both, we do both.
We do more
Both
than
semesters.
it's research in the fall.
My first inclination is to put my broadcasters on and do a documentary about Hazelwood.
Yeah.
Oh, cool
That's
thing.
That's a good
Oh,
idea.
cool thing.
But how do we get out of like, or 2 schools a year?
Yeah.
And I've worked in 3 of the schools in the state,
Mhm.
and now I visit all of the schools in the state.
Oh, that's-
So, except for you two, you should talk. And I see such diversity in the amount of commitment there is to even allowing students to have a voice at all about anything. I'm talking about, like, I have a joke with my students when I say, when you come to the university, be ready not to be a good little sponge that sits in the chair and absorbs information anymore. Because that's what I see in a lot of high schools. Now,
That's not my kind
oh, obviously not, you're here.
But
But my point is that in 2 of the 3 districts I worked in, that was very much the case.
So
And
you
those
say,
of us that weren't doing that were the exception to the culture.
Right.
We were like an
Can I go
underscore.
off the record?
please,
No tweeting.
go ahead,
I don't know, maybe, I don't know.
just say it.
We had an issue in the building, I don't know if you're familiar with YICAC.
Of course,
It's a
gosh, yeah.
horrible YICAC, it's a horrible.
YICAC, absolutely,
It's horrible, at a high school level, it was,
An anonymous social media.
it was awful.
Anything
Um,
else?
We had one of our seniors, don't have a story, tell you the story. The kids, we couldn't stop it at the administrative level,
Well,
I mean,
like
I-
a firewall or something.
it didn't work, it didn't
Oh, it didn't
work.
work?
No.
Because people have access on their own phones.
Yeah,
That's the
it
thing.
didn't
The firewall's only good for the school.
We had a responsible, he is our.
Student council
our
president, and he
student
was like
council
a,
president.
sort of like a, he dabbles in journalism, but he really wasn't.
But he does the show. He
does, yeah, he does one.
It's, I hate that you call it morning announcements, he does the morning program, and he asked, he went to Mrs. Posey, he's also really nasty things on this YICAC, he went to Mrs. Posey, Noreen, he said, I need to make an announcement, I'm going to absolve you, I'm going to absolve the program, but I need as a student leader in this building, to let the kids know that this is wrong. And,
Well, they were saying some pretty nasty things.
Sure.
Yeah.
People in general,
Right.
students,
He-
teachers.
So he got
I
on
mean,
the
just
air in the
like
morning
really-
announcements.
there was no administrative
Review.
Response.
nothing,
No,
no
no,
review,
no,
nothing.
no, right.
Not even by you.
Nice.
No.
He
I
had,
did read what he was gonna say, I read the teleprompter.
but he had, you
I
had
heard
teleprompter,
his
but
grammar.
Teddy also went off he kind of,
Yeah.
and what he made a plea to students, and he was angry, you could see his anger. But he had the entire student body for that 3 to 5 minutes, and the floor was his, and you were not shutting him down.
No.
He went live, and he said to the kids, this is wrong. He kind of called out, you know, these were
very
some of the teachers. It was,
Mhm.
and he said, if you have any respect for your teachers, for being a member of this student body, you need to right now take out your phone and you need to delete the app. I would say that most of the kids, many of the kids did. Once the app was deleted, there was a handful of the ones that were doing it. And you know what? You want to talk trash talk to
Right.
yourself.
You lost your audience.
You lost your audience.
Right.
And she
Nice.
gave him that opportunity to do that. So it is. It's
And
a.
so this is so consistent with our experience that when students want to use their voices, it oftentimes really is, I mean, I would call that a conservative position, right? The kid is not saying, let her rip, guys, anything goes, let's tear into those teachers, right? I mean, he's taking a position that would be completely consistent with the establishment position, which is, don't use this, right?
That's right, I didn't
Yeah.
even think of that.
He
But that's,
shut it down.
and that's often the way students want to use their voices, going back to what you said, because they are the model students in the school. They are the college-bound students. They're the high academic achievers. They're the people who turn square corners, and they want to see everybody else doing it too. And oftentimes, they're using their voices to tell the people in the adult world, hey guys, step it up. You're letting things get too slack here. You're letting too much slip by. I mean, the number one thing that the number one lightning rod for censorship that we deal with nationally in the high school media is sex. Anything related to sex or sexuality. But the sex articles, the sex columns and articles that are censored always are coming from the perspective of the kids who are writing them are trying to tell adult authority figures, people are being too dangerously promiscuous
Right.
and you need to stop it. That's
Right.
always the perspective they're
Don't you
coming
have a
from.
couple of live cases right now?
There were so this is the embarrassing thing is that you can Google the phrase banana condom on my website and come up with multiple results. Now there are so many of these cases going on around the country where students. This one happens to be from Michigan, but there was one, and this actually
Can you give us can you give some background? With
yeah. So
The story is actually good. It's a pretty good story.
Jonathan, see if you can refresh or unfresh. It's not coming up on the screen, but you can see it on.
Oh, okay, good, yeah. So the backstory is these were two simultaneous things that both happened unrelated to each other, one at a school in California and one at a school in Michigan, where the students, the theme of the stories was the inadequacy of sex education and that they were dissatisfied with, they felt like what they were being taught was unrealistic and was out of touch with the way that students were really living. And so this is the Michigan one. It's time to have the sex talk. And so they go out and they look at the CDC website and they call independent experts and they do their own research about sort of like myths and misperceptions about sex and all the kind of weird things that people have been told about, you know, that you can't get pregnant if, you know, you have sex for the first time or whatever. And they're just shooting down these myths about sex and about STDs. And the public freaks out because all they see is this is kids talking about sex.
All you see is the banana, that's the problem.
Yeah, right.
That's what, it's the banana.
I told one of the teachers, I said, I gave her this line to go into the school board with. I don't think she used it. I would have, but I said, go in there and tell them, you know, I know that this is hard for us as adults, but we have to come to the understanding that by the time our kids are 15 or 16 or 17 years old, every one of them has already seen a banana. So, I mean, this is the anti-Hazelwood laws at work because in California, the public reaction was exponentially worse. The reaction, because it was a very, very religiously conservative community, and people came to the school board looking for blood with torches and pitchforks, wanting that teacher's job, and the school district attorney told the school board, you guys can't do anything. Your hands are tied, that's the law. You can let these people vent, but you cannot fire the teacher. You cannot lay a hand on the newspaper. You can let these guys talk, but you can't do anything. And that's what the school district did. In Michigan, where they don't have a law, they actually did wind up, they put the newspaper under, it had never before been under mandatory pre-approval by administrators, and now it is. So they've essentially punished the students and the teacher, and the teacher, I guess, probably go look for another job at a more supportive district.
Was that the one where the student was actually talking about her own experience? Was that like a personal sort of testimonial?
Don't remember that level of detail, if that was the Michigan one or the California one. I don't
know. One of them involved, they said they were setting a bad example or damaging the innocence of the student.
Yeah, that's probably the
California. I was reading the story and they were like, what? Like, what is this?
It's just,
Yeah, and these are very, again, right, the perspective of all of them is having lots of sex is a bad thing and you should not do it. That's the vantage point of all of these. It's never, anything goes, guys, whoop it up. It's never that.
It's not a cautionary tale.
Yes, yeah. And so that's what people are being stopped from doing. They're being stopped from telling their classmates to be on their better behavior. They're being stopped from telling people in authority, hey, you know how bad you think things are? They're worse than you think. We have the inside knowledge, and we're here to tell you that the problem is worse than you think, and you should do something about it. And that's what they're being stopped from saying. So yeah, it's so funny that almost never, and this is right. What the response from the school will be is, well, you glamorize or you glorify sex. That's what we hear all the time. You're glamorizing or you're glorifying this topic. If you talk about drug abuse, that means you glamorized or you glorified drugs. You talk about sex, you glamorize or you glorified it, because all they see, it's like the Gary Larson had this great cartoon in The Far Side that used to run in the paper, where the panel number one is a guy trying to train his dog, right? And the caption says, "This is what we tell our dogs." And the guy is saying, "Ginger, I'm telling you for the last time, stay off that couch, Ginger." And then the second panel is what the dog hears. And it's Ginger, blah, 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 Ginger, because that's the only thing the dog knows, right? And so it's the same thing with these as all the people in the audience here, right? The students are saying sex is bad and sex is dangerous, so you should have less sex. And what they hear is sex, blah, 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 sex, blah, 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 sex, blah, 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 blah. That's all they Well, I'm really, so two things. First of all, in addition to the research about self-censorship, the other research piece that I would love for somebody to take on, I'm just so convinced that this is a provable fact, but I would love for somebody to confirm my anecdotal impression, to take two groups of students, a group of students that has been through a regime of journalism education and one that has not as a control group, and find out if after completing the regime of journalism education, they are less likely to engage in cyberbullying behavior than the ones who have not. Because I'm just so convinced, because when I talk to kids, and they call us all the time, they're super conservative about these judgment calls. They're always calling me saying, I'm really worried that this might be libelous. I'm really worried that I might be libeling somebody. And they almost never are. I mean, they're really conservative about these judgment calls because they have been told by their journalism educators to be careful about libel. And so they err on the side of not publishing because they're risk averse, and so I think that'd be a fascinating piece of academic research for somebody to take those two groups and see if we could really demonstrate that going through a semester or a year of journalism education makes you more mindful about what you publish on social media. I feel sure that that's a provable thing.
That's provable.
The other thing is, remember I mentioned that when we go into a journalism class, and am I right to teachers here that they look like 2/3 to 3/4 girls?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. So we realized that itself was a very powerful message that we weren't adequately tapping into. That if you make the discussion less about the rights of journalists and more about the rights of girls and the ability of girls to develop their leadership skills, then you expand the tent of people who care, right? I mean, there are very few people, frankly, who care about whether newspapers live or die.
That's for sure.
There are lots of people who care about whether girls get leadership skills and opportunities to develop as leaders and are encouraged to be the best leaders they could be. And when you think about, again, right, it's like my cyberbullying case. I don't have to exaggerate this. All you have to say is, what does a girl learn when she is the editor of the newspaper? She learns to manage personnel, to stick to a budget, to deal with advertisers and customers and aggrieved members of the public, to meet deadlines, right? She's running a business. It's the only experience you have in school that approximates running a business. There is nothing else like it. There is nothing even close that when you're done with it, you have been the proprietor of a small business. And so with that in mind, we started this. This is a kind of a beta site that we just went live with called The Active Voice. And the whole idea is to make censorship into a girl power issue.
Awesome!
And so we've got some videos from Mary Beth Tinker and some
awesome.
Other, let's see.
What a brilliant strategy.
What
a brilliant strategy. Frank, you are a genius. Is it theactivevoice.org?
Theactivevoice.org.
I'm already a huge fan of the Student Voice Law Center, but now with the Active Voice project, I'm really excited to see how they're kind of taking things to a new level for young women journalists, and how it's going to be a way for
But these are all pictures I've taken and museums I've visited around the country, and they all look like this.
to help each other, to encourage each other to stand up and speak up and use their voices about so many issues that are affecting their lives. And so I'm really excited about the whole project, and I just encourage everybody to get involved with it, to connect with it, because by doing that, you're going to connect with young women all over the country who are speaking up about different things, and you're going to encourage each other and help and support each other. That's what it's all about, is connecting, I think.
Anyway, so that campaign is brand new, and again, if you're looking for, if you've got some I mean, we'll take men too, but if you've got some female students who are interested in being, a part of something like this, we're trying to make this into a campaign. We're trying to make this into a movement, and I could really use, the input of teenage girls into like what would turn this into a movement, what would get them, out of their chairs to actually do something about it. I mean, right now, this is what we have. We have concept. We've got, some.
And you're looking at high school, also undergraduate.
I think, well, so the focus right now is on high school only because the censorship stories are much more pronounced there. I mean, at the college level, when somebody calls us, it's normally not, although this is happening, it's normally not censorship, and it's normally not, it's not the same level of, it's not the blatant censorship that we experience at high schools. It's a different brand of censorship. What it is now, frankly, is just being shut out of access to information. I mean, that's what people are calling us about now. It's like, look, I just can't find out anything. No one will talk to me. No one will give me interviews. But college journalism is much more of a 50-50 gender proposition than high school is. And in high school, it really, truly is a girls' club. So I think the message of Active Voice is built around high school. Like one of the things we're trying to do is, I mean, we aspire to do this, and we're going to do it, is build an online mentoring community, get women who are successful in law and media and business to sort of be virtual mentors to girls in high school who are struggling with these freedom of expression issues, and do little, chats that we can then blog about and post online, because it is a really lonely thing for girls sometimes to go through. I mean, for a kid, it's a lonely thing to go through this. A lot of times you're ostracized even by your own peers. I hear this from kids who are being told, like, look, don't rock the boat, you're a troublemaker, you're making school bad. It doesn't make you a popular person even among your own friends. And so, to kind of build that support network virtually is part of what that campaign is about.
Can you mentioned people are reaching out to the center. Can you explain a little bit like the role of the center and who should contact the center and for what kind of like reasons and what are resources?
Well, we have a network of over 150 volunteer lawyers around the country. That's how I got started. I was one of them. And they will take cases to court if they have to. Oftentimes, just having a letter written by an attorney to the school attorney or the college attorney is enough to be a wake-up call to say, oh, wow, I think we've got too far. I think we've crossed the line. I think we've gotten ourselves into trouble. But that is a minority of the cases. The majority of those 2,000 contacts that we have are resolved by one of us on the staff just equipping the students with some talking points, basically. I mean, a lot of it is because we are about empowering students to be their own advocates. And so a lot of times it's us walking through this kind of stair-step strategy where it is, well, step number one, let's sit down and compose an email to your school superintendent or your school board member where you kind of escalate this, right, a little bit. And then step number two is if that doesn't work, you're going to go and you're going to talk to the school board in that microphone at that public comment period, and here are some tips and talking points for you to take and use. And then step number three is you're going to go to the local news media, and here are some things that you could tell them, you know. So we just walk them through that, basically. It's like we walk them through a campaign, and they do it. And oftentimes, you know, I mean, that's the best cases for us are the ones where you never know we were there. We're like the ninja moving invisible in the night. That's the very best cases are the ones where we're invisible.
So students are reaching out to you, not teachers?
Both. I would say it's probably pretty close to 50-50. Yeah, that because oftentimes, right? I mean, the teacher is going to be the one who went to one of my workshops, went to one of my presentations, has one of my business cards. Yeah, and you know, we encourage them both to do it. But I always do tell the teachers, you know, the safest thing for you to do is to put them in touch with us and then step back out of the picture so that you are not the face of the controversy.
So I have a question then, how do they find out about this network?
Honestly, it is one of two things. It's either I am, as I am today, on the road about 50% of my life, and so I'm going out and doing kind of you know, awareness-raising things. And the other is Google. You know, they're just literally they're Googling censorship of student journalism or censorship of newspapers, and our site comes up, and they say, "Oh, I didn't know it existed, but this is cool."
Yeah. We also, as the high school advisors and college advisors, too, we have a listserv of like 1,000 advisors nationwide. So if anybody is having a problem, we send an email to the listserv, and somebody immediately will say, have your students contact the SPLC.
Yeah.
It's very well known.
Yeah. This has been a super inspiring talk, and I am so grateful to you, Frank, for giving us an occasion to come together to think about these issues. It's a consciousness-raising process, and I'm pretty certain that each of us goes back to our network and shares and talks and invites us to continue this dialogue. I think we should imagine that we might come back together in the fall semester and see what's possible. Because I really like the idea that from our different vantage points, from where we sit, we can take small actions that together add up to larger actions. So, you know, a student-produced documentary about this issue, for the senior portfolio, right? A group of college students working on a project, a outreach campaign to the writing and rhetoric teachers at the high school about student voice. It's clear we have a lot of needs in the state to expand our appreciation for student voice, our understanding of how legal systems can support or disable student voice, and for building respect for the very powerful competencies that journalism education builds toward being a responsible citizen in the digital world. So for all those meaningful outcomes, I am a very proud supporter of the Pure Hazelwood movement.
It's never going
And I think you're going to make, I think we will find more friends in Rhode Island to see if we can expand this campaign in the 2015-2016 school year. So look forward to more opportunities for us to come together. The fact that we have the best journalism program in the state, just like, what, 10 minutes from here, is a really great opportunity for us to imagine how a campaign, how we might be able to leverage URI's Harrington School with the writing and rhetoric program in the early college program and
We do have
in the
public
education
records
lab.
as one of our outcomes, so that's already.
It's
there.
really simpatico.
Yeah.
So maybe we can make something happen in 2015, but you've given us something to think about as we now go back to our summer vacation pretty soon. Pretty soon,
It's a long
we'll
one.
go to our summer vacation and think about possibilities.
Well, I'm just so excited by the creativity in this room, and I'm being paid to do this, but you guys are not, and so I have all the admiration in the world for you guys for giving your time, free, uncompensated, to come here to be part of this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.